The suds dripped from her reddened fingers as she scrubbed another greasy plate, and she did not notice the tall cowboy watching her from the doorway until his shadow fell across the basin of murky water. It was July 1876 in Deadwood, Dakota Territory, and the Golden Nugget Saloon had seen better days. The floorboards creaked with rot, the piano keys stuck more often than they played, and the smell of stale whiskey mixed with tobacco smoke clung to everything like a second skin. Clara Whitmore had been washing dishes in that back room for 3 months now, ever since the stagecoach carrying her and her late father had been attacked by road agents just outside of town. Her father had not survived the gunshot wound to his chest, and she had arrived in Deadwood alone, penniless and desperate for any work that would keep her fed and sheltered. The man in the doorway was broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of long days working cattle under the relentless Dakota sun. His hat was worn but well-kept, his boots dusty from travel, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds gathering over the Black Hills. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch somewhere between her lungs and throat. "You are working too hard for too little," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel underfoot. Clara straightened, wiping her wet hands on the stained apron tied around her waist. "I beg your pardon, sir, but my work is none of your concern." He stepped further into the cramped room, and she noticed the confident way he moved, like a man who knew exactly what he wanted from this world and would not apologize for taking it. "Name is James Cordell. I own a cattle ranch about 15 miles north of here, up near Spearfish Creek. Been running it for 5 years now, built it up from nothing but scrubland and determination." "That is very interesting, Mr. Cordell, but I have another 20 plates to wash before Mr. Henderson will let me sleep tonight." She turned back to her basin, hoping he would take the hint and leave her to her misery. "Quit that job and come run my ranch instead." The plate she had been holding slipped from her fingers and clattered back into the water, splashing soapy droplets across her threadbare dress. She spun around to face him, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry, what did you say?" James Cordell removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His expression was entirely serious. "I need someone who knows how to manage a household, keep books, handle supplies and planning. My ranch is doing well, but I am spending so much time on the business side that the rest is falling to pieces. I have been watching you these past 3 days, every time I came into town for supplies. You work harder than any 2 men I have employed, you do not complain, and you have got intelligence in your eyes. That is worth more than gold to me." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks, though whether from anger or embarrassment she could not say. "You have been watching me." "That is highly inappropriate, Mr. Cordell, and you cannot simply walk into a saloon and offer a strange woman a job running your ranch. What would people say? What would they think?" "I do not care what people think. I care about keeping my ranch running properly so it can grow into something that will last." He took another step closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage and wide-open spaces. "I will pay you fair wages, give you your own room in the ranch house, and you will be treated with nothing but respect. You will work hard, I will not lie about that, but you will work for yourself, and for something that matters, not for a man like Henderson who pays you pennies and works you until your hands bleed." She looked down at her hands, at the raw skin and broken nails, and felt something twist painfully in her chest. He was right about Henderson. The saloon owner was a cruel man who enjoyed having power over those who had nowhere else to turn. Just yesterday he had docked her pay because she had broken a glass, even though the glass had already been cracked when she picked it up. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "There must be dozens of women in Deadwood who would take such a position." James put his hat back on, settling it low over his eyes. "Because when I watched you work, I saw someone who has not given up despite everything this world has thrown at her. I saw someone who does a job right even when nobody is watching and nobody cares." That is the kind of person I want helping me build something that will outlast both of us." Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had not cried when the road agents attacked their stagecoach. She had not cried at her father's grave. She would not cry now in front of this strange cowboy with his impossible offer. "I would need to give Mr. Henderson notice," she said, hating how her voice trembled. "You will do no such thing. That man does not deserve your consideration. Pack whatever belongings you have, and I will wait for you out front. We can be at the ranch before midnight if we leave within the hour." "Mr. Cordell, I cannot just—" "Yes, you can. You are afraid, and I understand that. You do not know me, and I am asking you to trust me with your safety and your future. But ask yourself this: what future do you have here? How long before Henderson decides your labor is worth even less than he pays you now? How long before some drunk decides to bother you and Henderson does nothing to stop it because you are just the girl who washes dishes?" His words struck her like physical blows because they were true. She had already faced unwanted attention from the saloon patrons, and Henderson had merely laughed when she complained. She was utterly alone in this rough mining town with no family and no prospects. The only thing waiting for her in Deadwood was more back-breaking work and slow starvation of both body and spirit. "Give me 20 minutes, she said, untying her apron with shaking fingers. James Cordell smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and almost gentle. "I will be waiting." She gathered her few possessions in a canvas bag: 2 dresses, a shawl her mother had knitted before the fever took her 5 years ago, a book of poetry that was falling apart at the seams, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. Everything she owned in the world fit easily into one small bag, and that realization should have made her sad. But instead she felt a strange lightness in her chest, as though she had been holding her breath for 3 months and could finally exhale. Henderson was in the main room of the saloon, counting money at the bar. He looked up as she emerged from the back, still wearing her stained dress and carrying her bag. "Where do you think you are going, girl?" "I am leaving, Mr. Henderson. I will not be returning." His face darkened, and he slammed his hand on the bar top. "You owe me for room and board. You cannot just walk out of here. You charged me for room and board out of my wages, and we both know it. I owe you nothing." Her voice did not shake this time, and she felt a fierce pride in that. Henderson started to come around the bar, his expression ugly, but then he stopped. James Cordell had entered the saloon and positioned himself between Henderson and Clara, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. "The lady said she is leaving. I suggest you let her go without making this difficult." Henderson looked at James, then at Clara, and his lips curled into a sneer. "Take her then. She was useless anyway." Clara wanted to spit at him, but James touched her elbow gently and guided her toward the door. They stepped out into the dusty street, and she breathed in the night air, sweet with pine from the surrounding hills. She had not realized how trapped she had felt until this moment of freedom. James's horse was tied up outside, a strong bay gelding with intelligent eyes. Next to it stood a smaller chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face. "This is Juniper," James said, stroking the mare's neck. "She is gentle and sure-footed. Have you ridden before?" "Yes, though not recently." Clara approached the mare carefully, letting the animal smell her hand before she patted the soft nose. "Good. It is not a difficult ride, but the trail can be tricky in the dark. Stay close to me." He helped her mount, his hands steady at her waist, and then swung onto his own horse with practiced ease. They rode out of Deadwood as the saloons and gambling halls were just beginning to fill with miners and cowboys and all the rough men who sought their fortunes in the Black Hills. Clara did not look back. The trail north followed Whitewood Creek for a time before branching west toward Spearfish Canyon. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the landscape of pine-covered hills and rocky outcroppings. They rode in silence for the first hour, and Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait. her body remembering skills she had learned as a child on her father's small farm in Missouri. "Tell me about your ranch," she said eventually, wanting to break the silence that had grown heavy between them. James glanced back at her, his face shadowed beneath his hat brim. "It is called the Broken Creek Ranch, named for the way Spearfish Creek splits around a boulder formation on the property. I have about 300 head of cattle right now, with plans to expand to 500 by next year. The ranch house is small but solid, built from logs I cut myself. There is a barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and a good well that never runs dry. The land is beautiful, some of the best grazing in the territory. How many men do you employ?" "4 regular hands, Tom, Lewis, Charlie, and a young fellow called Pete who is still learning. They are good men, hard workers, and they will treat you with respect or answer to me." Clara considered this. "And what exactly would my responsibilities be?" "Managing the household, which right now means cooking meals and keeping the place clean. But more importantly, I need you to handle the books and records. I am good with cattle and horses, but paperwork makes my head ache. I need someone who can track expenses, manage inventory, handle correspondence with buyers in Cheyenne and Omaha. Someone who can help me make smart decisions about when to buy and sell, when to expand, and when to hold back. You are trusting me with a great deal, considering you know nothing about me. Then tell me about yourself." So Clara told him, her words coming slowly at first and then faster as the story spilled out. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her mother's death from fever and her father's decision to head west, seeking a fresh start. She told him about the attack on the stagecoach, about watching her father bleed out while she held his hand and promised him she would survive. She would find a way to keep living. She told him about arriving in Deadwood with nothing and taking the only job she could find, about the fear and loneliness that had become her constant companions. When she finished, James was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry about your father. My own parents died in a cholera outbreak when I was 17. I know what it is to be alone in this world." "Is that why you built your ranch, to create something permanent?" "Partly, but also because I wanted to prove I could do it. Everyone said I was too young, too inexperienced, that I would fail within a year. I wanted to show them they were wrong." There was no boastfulness in his voice, only simple truth. They rode on, and Clara found herself stealing glances at his broad back, at the confident way he sat his horse. He was unlike any man she had met before, direct, honest, and seemingly unconcerned with social conventions. He had offered her a job without knowing anything about her except what he had observed, and he had stood up to Henderson without hesitation. She did not know if she could trust him, but she knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to try. The ranch appeared suddenly as they crested a hill, nestled in a valley where Spearfish Creek wound through stands of ponderosa pine and cottonwood. The main house was indeed small, a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Lamplight glowed in one window, warm and welcoming. Beyond the house, she could see the dark shapes of the barn and outbuildings, and in the distance, the pale forms of cattle grazing in moonlit pastures. "It is beautiful," Clara breathed and meant it. James smiled, that same transformative expression she had seen earlier. "Welcome to Broken Creek Ranch. Come on, let me show you inside." The interior of the house was sparse but clean, with simple furniture and bare walls. The main room held a stone fireplace, a large wooden table, and several mismatched chairs. A small kitchen area occupied one corner, and 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "This will be your room," James said, opening one of the doors to reveal a small space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the creek. "It is not much, but it is private and the roof does not leak." "It is perfect," Clara said honestly. After sleeping on a straw mattress in a storage closet at the saloon, this room seemed like luxury. "Get some rest. We can discuss details in the morning." James hesitated in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "I am glad you came with me, Clara. I think this is going to work out well for both of us." After he left, Clara sank onto the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the enormity of what she had just done. She had left her job, left Deadwood, and ridden into the night with a man she had only just met. It was reckless and impulsive and completely unlike her usual careful nature. But as she lay back on the surprisingly comfortable mattress and looked out the window at the star-filled sky, she felt something she had not experienced in months. Hope. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, and for a moment she could not remember where she was. Then memory returned and she sat up quickly, noting that pale sunlight was streaming through her window. She had slept later than intended. Quickly she changed into her other dress, which was only slightly less worn than the one she had traveled in, and braided her dark hair into a simple plait. Her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser showed a thin face with high cheekbones, dark eyes that were too large, and skin that had gone pale from working indoors. She looked like someone who had been sick for a long time and was only just beginning to recover. In the main room, James was standing at the stove, cooking breakfast with the efficient movements of someone who had done it many times before. He had removed his hat, and in the morning light she could see his face clearly. Strong jaw, straight nose, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. He was perhaps 26 or 27, only a few years older than her own 23 years. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile. "I hope you are hungry. I made enough for an army out of habit. I am starving, actually." She moved to the table, noticing that it was already set with 2 plates and cups. He served her bacon, eggs, and thick slices of bread toasted over the fire, and for several minutes they ate in comfortable silence. The food was simple but good, and Clara ate more than she had in weeks. "The men will be coming in for breakfast soon," James said, draining his coffee. "I want to introduce you properly and explain the new arrangement. Some of them might be surprised, but they will adjust. What if they do not want to work for a ranch where a woman is keeping the books? Then they can find employment elsewhere. This is my ranch and I make the decisions." His tone was firm but not angry, and Clara felt a flutter of something warm in her chest. The ranch hands arrived in a group, their boots loud on the porch steps. They stopped short when they saw Clara sitting at the table, their expressions ranging from surprise to curious to skeptical. James made the introductions. Tom was the oldest, a weathered man in his 50s with gray in his beard and kind eyes. Louis was younger, with the dark hair and accent of someone who had grown up speaking Spanish. Charlie was stocky and red-haired, with freckles across his nose. Pete was barely 20, tall and lanky and obviously shy. "Boys, this is Clara Whitmore. She is going to be managing the household and handling the business side of the ranch. You will treat her with the same respect you show me, and her word on ranch matters carries the same weight as mine." "Is that understood?" There was a moment of silence, and then Tom nodded. "Understood, boss. Welcome to Broken Creek, Miss Whitmore." The others echoed the sentiment, though Charlie looked dubious and Pete was blushing so furiously his freckles disappeared. Louis gave her a courteous nod and said, "It will be good to have proper meals again. No offense, boss, but your cooking is terrible." James laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "None taken. Clara, would you be willing to take over cooking duties? I will pay you extra." "Of course." "What time do the men usually eat?" "Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 7. We keep ranch hours here, which means early to bed and early to rise." After the men had eaten and headed out to start their daily work, James showed Clara around the property. The barn was well maintained, housing 6 horses in addition to the 2 they had ridden the night before. The bunkhouse was rougher but clean, with 4 beds and a small stove. The chicken coop held a dozen laying hens, and there was a vegetable garden that had been neglected but could be salvaged. "My wife planted that garden," James said quietly, staring at the overgrown rows of beans and squash. Clara felt her stomach drop. "Your wife? She died 2 years ago. Fever took her in the space of 3 days." His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Her name was Sarah. She was a good woman and she loved this ranch almost as much as I do. I am so sorry, James. She did not know what else to say. No words could ease that kind of loss. He shook his head as if clearing away dark thoughts. Life goes on. The ranch goes on. That is what Sarah would have wanted. He turned to look at her, his gray eyes searching her face. I should have told you last night. I do not want you to think I was hiding anything. You do not owe me your life story. We are employer and employee, nothing more. Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly for her to identify. Right, of course, he gestured toward the house. Let me show you the office and the books. That is where you will be spending most of your time. The office was a small room off the main living area, with a desk, shelves lined with ledgers and papers, and a window overlooking the pastures. James pulled out the current account books and spread them on the desk, and Clara could immediately see the problem. His handwriting was barely legible, figures were scratched out and rewritten, and there seemed to be no consistent system for recording transactions. This is a disaster, she said before she could stop herself. James grimaced. I know, that is why I need you. Clara rolled up her sleeves. All right, give me today to sort through this mess and figure out where we actually stand. Tomorrow we can discuss what needs to change going forward. You are not going to quit on me already? She looked up at him and smiled, surprising herself. Not yet, Mr. Cordell. Though I reserve the right to quit if things become truly hopeless. Fair enough. And Clara, call me James. We are going to be working too closely for formality. After he left, Clara settled into the desk chair and began the painstaking process of making sense of the chaotic records. It took her most of the day, but gradually a picture emerged. The ranch was actually doing quite well financially, with steady income from cattle sales and reasonable expenses. The problem was that James had no clear sense of his profit margins or cash flow, which meant he could not plan effectively for expansion or unexpected costs. She worked through lunch, too absorbed to notice her hunger, and was still bent over the ledgers when James appeared in the doorway with a sandwich and a cup of coffee. You need to eat, he said, setting them on the desk. Thank you. James, your ranch is in better shape than you think. You are actually turning a decent profit. His face brightened. Really? I was worried I was barely breaking even. Not at all, but you need better systems for tracking everything. Give me another few days and I will have this organized properly. Over the following weeks, Clara settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the men, spent her mornings working on the books and ordering supplies, and used her afternoons to cook, clean, and tend the garden. It was hard work, harder in some ways than the saloon had been, but it was work that mattered. She could see the direct results of her efforts in the organized office, the well-fed ranch hands, and the vegetables beginning to thrive in the garden. James was a constant presence, in and out of the house throughout the day as he managed the cattle and horses. He was a good employer, patient with her questions and generous with his praise when she did something well. But he was also something else, something that made her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, something that made her hyper-aware of his presence whenever he was near. She tried to ignore these feelings, reminding herself that he was her employer and she was his employee. He had loved his wife, and that love was evident in the way his voice softened when he occasionally mentioned Sarah. Clara had no right to these feelings, no right to imagine what it might be like if he looked at her the way she caught herself looking at him. But the feelings grew anyway, persistent as weeds in the garden. One evening in late August, James came in from working with a difficult horse, his shirt torn and blood seeping from a scrape on his forearm. Clara immediately went to him, her heart in her throat. What happened? Are you all right? Just a scratch. The new stallion is not as broken as the man who sold him to me claimed. He tried to smile, but she could see he was in pain. Sit down. Let me clean that wound before it gets infected. She brought water and clean cloths and carefully washed the blood away from the long scrape on his forearm. His skin was warm under her fingers, the muscles corded and strong. She could feel him watching her as she worked, and when she glanced up their eyes met and held. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Clara did not have a name for. "You are good at this," James said quietly. "Taking care of things, taking care of people. My mother taught me. She said it was a woman's duty to tend to the sick and injured." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was." Clara finished bandaging his arm and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing. "There, try not to do anything that will reopen it, Clara." He caught her hand before she could move away. "I want to thank you for everything you have done here. The ranch has never run this smoothly. You have made such a difference. I am just doing the job you hired me for. It is more than that. You have brought life back to this place." Sarah's death left a shadow over everything, and I did not realize how dark it had become until you arrived and started letting light back in. She should pull her hand away. She should make some polite comment and retreat to her room. Instead, she found herself saying, "You still miss her very much." "I do. I always will. But I am learning that missing someone and living your life do not have to be mutually exclusive." His thumb traced a gentle circle on the back of her hand. "I am learning that it is possible to honor the past while still being open to the future." Clara's breath caught. "James, what are you saying?" "I am saying that somewhere between watching you transform my chaotic office into a model of efficiency and eating your excellent cooking, and seeing you coax life back into Sarah's garden, I have developed feelings for you that go well beyond employer and employee." Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I thought I was imagining things. The way you look at me sometimes, I thought it was just wishful thinking on my part. You have feelings for me too?" He sounded almost hesitant, vulnerable in a way she had never heard before. "Yes." "God help me, yes. I have been trying so hard not to, but I cannot help it." James stood, still holding her hand, and with his other hand he gently cupped her cheek. "Then why should we fight it? Life is too short and too hard out here to deny ourselves happiness when we find it." "Because I am afraid," she whispered. "I am afraid that this is too good to be true, that I will wake up and find myself back in that saloon washing dishes. I am afraid that you will realize I am not worth the trouble, that I will disappoint you somehow. Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "You are the strongest, most capable woman I have ever met. You survived things that would have broken most people. You took a chance on a stranger and rode off into the night on nothing but faith. You have rebuilt your life from nothing in the space of 2 months. If anything, I am afraid I will disappoint you. That is impossible. Then we are both fools, worrying about things that will not happen." He leaned closer, his intention clear, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to pull away. She wanted this more than she had wanted anything in her entire life. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. His lips were warm and gentle, and when he pulled back to look at her, his eyes held a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I am going to court you properly," he said. "I know we are living in the same house and working together every day, but that does not mean we should skip the important steps. I want to do this right, Clara. You deserve that." "All right," she managed, still dizzy from the kiss. "How does one court properly on a remote ranch in the Dakota Territory?" He grinned. "I guess we will figure it out together." And they did. Over the following months, James courted Clara with a combination of traditional gestures and improvisations necessitated by their situation. He picked wildflowers for her and left them on her pillow. He carved her a beautiful wooden box to hold her mother's shawl and her parents' daguerreotype. He took her riding through the hills on Sunday afternoons, showing her the hidden corners of his ranch. A meadow filled with purple lupine, a viewpoint where you could see for miles. A natural hot spring where the water bubbled up clear and warm. Clara reciprocated in her own ways. She learned his favorite foods and made sure to prepare them regularly. She mended his clothes with tiny, careful stitches. She listened when he talked about his plans for the ranch, offering suggestions and encouragement. She helped him work with the difficult stallion, using patience and gentleness to earn the animal's trust. The ranch hands noticed the change in their employer and said nothing, but Clara caught them smiling sometimes when James looked at her with obvious adoration. Tom, the oldest hand, pulled her aside one day and said, "It is good to see the boss happy again. Sarah would have approved of you, I think. She always wanted him to keep living, keep loving." As autumn painted the Black Hills in shades of gold and crimson, James took Clara on a picnic to the meadow where lupine had bloomed in summer. Now, it was filled with late-season wildflowers and dried grasses that rustled in the wind. They sat on a blanket and ate the lunch she had packed, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in the way of people who had grown to know each other deeply. "Clara, I need to ask you something," James said, setting down his half-eaten sandwich. "And I want you to think carefully before you answer." Her heart began to race. "All right. These past 4 months have been the happiest of my life since Sarah died, maybe even happier than before, though that feels strange to admit. You have brought joy and purpose and love back into my world, and I cannot imagine going forward without you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I know this is fast, but out here we do not have the luxury of long courtships. Life is too uncertain. Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner in building this ranch into something that will last for generations?" Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the afternoon light. It was beautiful in its simplicity, much like James himself. "Yes," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly as though it had been made for her. Then he kissed her with a passion that had been building for months, and she kissed him back with all the love and hope and fierce joy that filled her heart to bursting. They were married in early October, in a small ceremony at the ranch with Tom, Louis, Charlie, and Pete as witnesses. The circuit preacher happened to be passing through the territory, and he performed the service on the porch of the ranch house with the golden aspens as a backdrop. Clara wore a new dress she had sewn herself from blue calico, and James wore his best shirt and a tie that he kept fidgeting with nervously. "Do you, James Cordell, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." His voice was strong and sure. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." She was surprised her voice did not shake. "Then by the power vested in me by the Dakota Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." James did thoroughly to the whoops and applause of the ranch hands. When he finally released her, both of them were breathless and laughing. That night, after a celebratory dinner and much toasting with whiskey that Louis had been saving for a special occasion, James carried Clara across the threshold of what had been his bedroom and was now theirs. He set her down gently and looked at her with such love that she felt tears spring to her eyes again. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said, his hands framing her face. "I think we are both lucky," Clara replied. "I think we found each other exactly when we needed to." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, and everything Clara had dreamed it might be. James was gentle with her, patient with her nervousness, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, Clara felt a completeness she had never known was possible. This man who had found her washing dishes in a saloon had seen something in her that she had not even seen in herself. He had offered her not just a job but a future, and now he had given her his heart and his name and a home where she truly belonged. The first year of their marriage was not easy, but it was good. That winter tested them with blizzards that buried the ranch in snow and temperatures that dropped so low the water in the well froze solid. They lost several head of cattle to the cold, and James drove himself nearly to exhaustion trying to save the rest. Clara worked alongside him, hauling feed to the animals and breaking ice so they could drink, her hands going numb inside her gloves. But they survived, And when spring came and the calves were born healthy and strong, the triumph they felt was all the sweeter for having been hard-won. Clara discovered she was pregnant in April, and James's joy was so great he picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing and begging him to put her down. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "You and me, we are going to be parents." Their son was born in December, during a brief warm spell between winter storms. The birth was long and difficult, attended by a midwife from Deadwood who had made the journey at James's desperate request. Clara thought she might die from the pain, and there were moments when she wished she would, but then the baby emerged squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the infant on Clara's chest. James was crying, tears streaming down his weathered face as he looked at his wife and new son. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. God, Clara, I love you so much." They named him Thomas after the ranch hand who had been the first to welcome Clara and who had become like a father to both of them. Tom himself was touched nearly to tears when they told him, and he took his role as the baby's honorary grandfather with solemn seriousness. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to grow and prosper under their joint management. Clara handled all the business aspects, corresponding with buyers and negotiating prices, while James managed the cattle and horses and land. They made an excellent team, each complementing the other's strengths. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 3, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah after James's first wife. James had suggested the name tentatively, worried it might bother Clara, but she had insisted. Sarah had been part of building this ranch, and her memory deserved to be honored. Little Sarah was quieter than her boisterous brother, with a thoughtful nature and a love of animals that rivaled her father's. By the time she was 4, she could ride a horse better than some grown men. In 1884, when Dakota Territory was beginning to show signs of eventually becoming a state, the Broken Creek Ranch was one of the most successful in the region. James and Clara had expanded to over 800 head of cattle and had purchased additional land, more than doubling the size of the original property. They had built a new, larger house to accommodate their growing family, though Clara had insisted they keep the original log cabin as a guest house because it held too many precious memories to abandon. Tom had retired from active ranch work, but still lived in the bunkhouse and spent his days teaching Thomas and Sarah everything he knew about horses and cattle. Lewis had married a woman from Spearfish and built a house on ranch property, and now worked as the foreman. Charlie had moved on to try his luck in Montana, but Pete had stayed, growing from a shy boy into a capable man who now managed the day-to-day operations alongside Lewis. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James took Clara back to the meadow where he had proposed. It looked much as it had that autumn day, though they were both older now, marked by the years of hard work and harsh weather and the thousand small challenges of building a life together. "You ever regret it?" James asked, holding her hand as they sat on a blanket surrounded by wildflowers. "Leaving Deadwood with a stranger, taking a chance on all of this." Clara looked at her husband, at the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair and the deep lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun and smiling. She thought about their children playing at the creek, about the ranch that thrived under their care, about the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me everything when I had nothing. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I could not even love myself. You gave me everything too. You brought me back to life when I thought I was done living. You made me believe in the future again." "We saved each other," Clara said simply. "Yes, I think we did." They sat in the meadow until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Then they rode home together, back to the ranch that was no longer just James's dream but theirs, back to the house filled with the laughter of their children, back to the life they had built together one day at a time. 3 more children followed, another son named Michael, and then twin girls they named Emma and Rose. The ranch house was always full of noise and activity, and sometimes Clara would stand in the doorway and watch her children playing and feel overwhelming gratitude for the path her life had taken. She thought sometimes about that night in the Golden Nugget Saloon, standing at the basin washing dishes with raw hands and a broken heart. She thought about the tall cowboy who had appeared in the doorway and offered her an impossible choice. If she could go back and tell that young woman what was waiting for her, she would say, "Take his hand, trust him. Your real life is about to begin." James built a schoolhouse on the ranch property and hired a teacher from the East, ensuring that not only his own children but also the children of his ranch hands received proper education. Clara taught them as well, passing on her love of reading and her head for figures. Thomas showed an aptitude for business that rivaled his mother's, while Sarah preferred working with the horses. Michael was still too young to show his interests clearly, but he followed his older siblings everywhere with determined devotion. As the children grew older, Clara and James found themselves with more time together again, and their love deepened into something both comfortable and passionate. They still took rides together on Sunday afternoons, still talked late into the night about their plans and dreams, still kissed like newlyweds when they thought no one was watching. In 1889, when the Dakota Territory officially split into North Dakota and South Dakota, and both were admitted to the Union as states, the Broken Creek Ranch held a massive celebration. Friends and neighbors from miles around attended, and there was dancing and music and enough food to feed an army. James and Clara stood on the porch of their ranch house watching the festivities, and he pulled her close. "We did it," he said. "We built something that will last. Our children will inherit this ranch and maybe their children after them. This land will remember the Cordell name long after we are gone." "It will remember both our names," Clara corrected gently. "This ranch is as much mine as yours. We built it together." "You are absolutely right." The Cordell Ranch, founded by James and Clara, who were stubborn enough to make something beautiful out of this harsh land. As the years continued to pass, Clara never forgot where she had come from. Every so often, when they went into Deadwood for supplies, she would walk past the Golden Nugget Saloon. It had changed hands several times, and Henderson was long gone, driven out of town by debts and his own bad reputation. She would look at the building and remember the girl she had been, scared and alone and washing dishes with bleeding hands, and she would feel a fierce pride in how far she had traveled. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew into manhood, showing the same dedication his parents had displayed. Sarah married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who loved her fierce independence. Michael decided he wanted to study law and headed east to school, promising to return and help protect the family's interests. The twins were still young but showed signs of inheriting their mother's intelligence and their father's determination. On their 25th wedding anniversary, James took Clara once again to their meadow. They were both in their 50s now, their hair going gray, their bodies marked by decades of hard work. But when James looked at Clara, he still saw the beautiful young woman who had taken a chance on a stranger's promise. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a leather-bound book. Clara opened it and found page after page filled with James's improving handwriting. It was the story of their life together, from that first night in the saloon to this very moment. He had recorded everything: their courtship, their wedding, the birth of each child, the struggles and triumphs of building the ranch, the 1,000 small moments that had made up their life together. "I wanted you to have this," James said, "so that someday our grandchildren and their grandchildren will know how it all began. How a desperate cowboy walked into a saloon and saw a woman washing dishes and knew, somehow, that she was going to change his life forever." Clara was crying, clutching the book to her chest. "James, this is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me. "You are the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me," he replied. "Every single day with you has been a gift." They sat in the meadow and read through the book together, reliving their years through James's words. When they reached the end, Clara took the pen he had brought and added her own words. "To whoever reads this in the years to come, know that love can be found in the most unexpected places. Know that taking a chance on someone can change your entire life. Know that hard work and dedication and choosing each other every single day can build something that will outlast your own lifetime. This ranch stands as proof that two people who truly love each other can create miracles. May you be as blessed as we have been. With love, Clara Cordell." They lived many more years together, long enough to see grandchildren and even great-grandchildren running through the fields of the Broken Creek Ranch. Long enough to see Thomas and his wife expand the operation even further, making the Cordell name synonymous with quality cattle throughout the region. Long enough to see all their children settled and happy, living lives filled with purpose and love. James passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Clara holding his hand just as she had held so many things together over their years together. At his funeral, attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, Clara stood dry-eyed and strong because she knew he would want her to be strong. But that night, alone in their bedroom, she finally allowed herself to weep. She cried for the loss of her partner, her best friend, her great love. She cried for all the days they would not have together, all the sunrises he would not see. But she also cried tears of gratitude because how many people were blessed with a love like theirs? How many people could say they had spent nearly 50 years with their soulmate? Clara lived for another 8 years after James's death, long enough to ensure the ranch would continue to thrive under Thomas's management. She spent her final years writing her own additions to the book James had started, filling in details and memories, and all the things she wanted future generations to know. On a warm spring morning, with wildflowers blooming outside her window and the sound of her great-grandchildren playing in the yard, Clara Cordell closed her eyes for the last time. She went peacefully, with a smile on her face, because she knew she had lived a full and beautiful life. She was buried next to James on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. On her headstone, Thomas had inscribed, "Clara Whitmore Cordell, she took a chance, she chose love, she built an empire." The Broken Creek Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the Cordell family line, growing and adapting with the times but never losing the essential character that James and Clara had given it. And in the ranch house, carefully preserved in a place of honor, sat the leather-bound book telling the story of how it all began. The story of a cowboy who saw a woman washing dishes in a saloon and recognized someone extraordinary. The story of a woman who was brave enough to ride off into the night with a stranger on nothing but faith. The story of two people who built a life and a legacy together, who chose each other every single day, who proved that love could transform everything. Their descendants read that book to their own children and grandchildren, keeping the story alive, making sure that Clara and James's love story was never forgotten. Because it was a reminder of something important, that even in the harshest circumstances, even when you have lost everything, even when you are alone and afraid, love can find you. And when it does, if you are brave enough to reach for it, it can change your entire world. The meadow where James proposed to Clara is still there, though it is now protected as part of the ranch's conservation land. Every spring, without fail, wildflowers bloom there in impossible profusion, as though the land itself remembers the love story that unfolded on its soil. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispers through the ponderosa pines and the creek babbles over the rocks, it is easy to imagine that you can hear echoes of their laughter, their voices, their enduring love. This is the story of the Broken Creek Ranch. This is the story of James and Clara Cordell. This is the story of how a simple act of faith and courage and love built something that lasted far beyond a single lifetime. And it all began with a cowboy who saw a woman washing dishes and had the wisdom and the courage to say, "Quit that job and come run my ranch instead."